Welcome to a football show, Monday edition here on the 440 Sports Network. My name is Braden Gall. That is Zach Lyons back in the saddle. Good to see you, my friend. Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group are two great local companies, local sponsors that keep this product free for all of you. If you would like to filter into the comments section as you normally do, please jump in. We will take questions, of course. As Brian Callahan had yes, absolutely, Bo. Thank you. It is a wonderful hat brought to you by Sinkers Beverages. I'm all decked out with Sinkers swag today. I got the Sinkers shirt. I got the Sinkers hat. If you'd like some of that stuff,
it's a corporate shill.
If you'd like some of that, then go check it out. Go check it out. Sinkers Beverages. So obviously we do appreciate their support. It's not, is it a corporate shill? Local business shill, I think is what it is. Local business shill. Small business shill. Support local, make that dollar work more in your community. So obviously lots of stuff to discuss today. Brian Callahan, long sit-down interview on the Athletics Football Show last week.
Just another feather in the cap of being different than Mike Vrabel.
Although, and I know you're going to have some comments about our show. Thanks to Paul Karski for filling in, of course, on Thursday. Paul and I both agree that the Mike Vrabel, this old school disciplinarian yell at everybody thing, a little overvalued, a little overplayed. So, but obviously, I do think Brian Callahan, the phrase used on the podcast, emotional intelligence, is much higher amongst NFL coaches today than it was certainly when we were kids or even just last generation. So a lot of stuff to discuss in that conversation. He talked a lot about Will Levis. So we're going to dive into the Will Levis conversation. We've set expectations, but what do we think expectations are from Brian Callahan, from internally inside the building, and what exactly does he need to focus on? Did Brian Callahan give us any insight into what they are looking towards and looking for from their quarterback and their entire offense, frankly, as they build game plans each week and they work together to execute a plan each Sunday? So a lot of really interesting stuff from the coach. But yes, I agree. Communication-wise, very, very different. Just admitting that he's green calling plays is something that Mike Vrabel never would have done. So we'll get to a lot of that stuff.
It is really more about being green about pivoting, which is I think is one of the more interesting aspects of what he talked about. And there's a lot of interesting things about Will Levis I want to dive into because I've already seen other shows misinterpret what he is saying and what he's talking about. But I'm very interested. There's a lot of like nuggets that I think is really cool, especially about Brian's dad, that I think is really interesting that has not been touched on or has not been said before in this interview.
Absolutely. So we got a lot to get to with that. There's a couple of minor stadium notes. Just want to make sure everybody knows about those. And of course, I know you had some things to say about the schedule release and Paul and I's conversation last week about everything. So obviously, we got a lot to do on the show today. Make sure you remember Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group. BuildKG.com for the Kingston Group. You guys know the name, you know the business, you know what they do, you know why you should use them. So I'm not going to tell you anything else. Just BuildKG.com, the Kingston Group. Just know that name before you make any big decision about your house. And we've told you so much about Sinkers Beverages, the greatest liquor store in the city, sister store Bluegrass up in Hendersonville. Of course, they are the title sponsor of Football and Other F Words. Make sure you check them out if you're in that area as well. You can also search Uber Eats and have the booze delivered directly to your house, which I recommend.
They drive so you can drink.
Absolutely. So first of all, how was the meet? How was the meet in Memphis over the weekend, Big Zach?
Yeah, the meet is good. We didn't win any we placed top 10 in one category. We were kind of outside of the rest, but this is how tough these competitions are. So for wings, which was one of the categories that I did, was I was 20th place, but 0.56 points away from first. 0.56. Like that is how small the margin is. So at that point, it's just like, it's insane, right? Like how close this thing is. My brother-in-law, he cooked turkey, and I was looking at the scores this morning for the turkey category, and he was 13 points away from first, but he was like 50 something. So like it's wide margins, and you don't get the same judges, right? So all these judges are of different varieties, ages, and all this stuff, and the same people that you may just get the wrong table that doesn't like spicy food, right? Or they like sweet to barbecue sauce, and if you don't have sweet barbecue sauce, you're just going to get dinged, and it's just crazy. We've also learned that there's steak competitions that go around, so I think I'll be entering in a few of those steak competitions. They're only
Ooh.
one day, so you just go down there, pick out your steak, grill the steak, and hopefully earn some money. And steak's right up my alley, so I'm very interested in.
How do I get the job I want? I don't want to compete in these competitions. I want to be the judge. That's what I want to be. Now I know I probably need like 50
You
years.
have to go through a class, but
I know.
there is a class for judges. And there's many. So the Wilson County Fair has a really huge, massive barbecue contest. Hendersonville has one. Lebanon, I guess that one would be in Lebanon, the Wilson County one. Hendersonville has one, and then Springfield has one, and they're all like big barbecue contests.
So already great question from Glory here. I would like can I get a definition of emotional intelligence? Emotions are typically illogical, and everyone in the comments, Stoney and Bo, already responding. We'll get to that in a minute when we start talking about what's going on with Brian Callahan and his emotional intelligence. What is your favorite competition meat? Number one.
I enjoy cooking the steak. So, okay. But I also I think we're going to venture into pork shoulders next year. I want to do a whole hog, but that's not going to be competition. But they do a whole hog there. And there's a guy, Myron Mixon, who's a big famous barbecue guy. That's all he did. He cooked 3 whole hogs, and that's what he had his like entire team of 30 people doing, was focusing on these 3 whole hogs. But there's a way you can do it fairly easily, like set up the whole hog, smoking machine and stuff.
Just let it run. Yeah.
Just let it run.
Yep. Well, I cheat. I've got the green egg out back, and so I can do the shoulders and the butts and the brisket and get it started at 4 a.m. and by dinner time it's ready to go. And just got to tell my wife, don't worry about the stall. Okay. Just don't worry about the stall. It's going to be okay. All right. So let's talk some football here. And I know, you guys, you were off Thursday. Again, special thanks to Paul Karski for filling in. Make sure you check out the pod and the website. Also, stackingtheinbox.com and football and other F words. But the schedule came out after y'all. You were off Wednesday and Thursday, and the schedule came out after both of those shows. So I know you had some reaction to what Paul and I talked about. If you missed that episode, you can catch it on YouTube. Give us a thumbs up, of course, or over on the podcast feed, which if you do, please give us a subscription and a review. 5 stars only, please. If you give us 4 stars, you are a hater. But I know you had some reaction and some thoughts to our conversation on Thursday.
Yeah, and it all revolved around the scheduling of the quarterbacks. I felt that there was a counterpoint, an easy counterpoint that was missed to be made about one part of it, and then I didn't really feel there was a real emphasis on the other part. You kind of like danced around it, but there wasn't like a real like true deep dive. And first, counterpoint to getting Aaron Rodgers in week 2. I think that's the perfect time to get Aaron Rodgers in week 2. This idea that he's the healthiest coming off an injury. Sure, maybe this is the healthiest he will be as the season goes on, but he hasn't played significant time with this cast of characters. There has been no game time. He got injured before his first game with this entire offensive group, with this entire new team, and now they've added 3 new offensive line pieces. And to me, this is the perfect time to get him because he will only have had 1 full game. What I worry about, though, about that game is not Aaron Rodgers and his health. It is that defense. This feels like a Cleveland week 2 game.
Yes.
And to me, this feels like the team that's like, Deshaun Watson was not good in that game. He did just enough, and Aaron Rodgers could do just enough because of that Jets defense. And this Jets defense against an established Jets defense going up against a new growing offense that's going to see growing pains, and with a relatively new quarterback and with a relatively new cast of characters all across this offense. That to me is the more worrisome aspect of the Jets game. Aaron Rodgers doesn't really worry me because, I mean, like, yes, he's good and he will be good, right? Like, that team will gel as it goes on, but Aaron Rodgers is a new piece. He never played any football with Garrett Wilson, with Malachi Corley, with that offensive line. He's never played any football with them. He literally only had like 2 snaps.
The reason I did not spend too much time on Aaron Rodgers' portion of that is because I think actually
You're
Stoney
hurt.
says he
You miss him. Lover,
Stone,
like Hilton
no,
Lover.
not at all. I do enjoy his style of comedy, I guess, and all the bizarre bullshit he says now. Stoney says he might not even make it to week 2, which I think I said on the show last week. I was like, oh, what are you talking about? He might not even make it to week 2. I don't think you need to give one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, first ballot Hall of Famer, all that much time to get ready. So I think he's a concern whether you play him in week 12 or week 2 or week 4 with those weapons. I agree with you that, and I think Paul kind of said this too, that you're an under 4.5 point underdog on the road to Chicago in week 1. That's one of those games that if the Titans are the Titans, they go up there and they like win easily, and everyone's like, wait a second, where'd that come from? Then you come home and you poop on yourself against the Jets team where you're favored at home, and Aaron Rodgers doesn't have to do a whole lot because the Jets defense is so good. So I agree with your analysis on that. I don't think, honestly, if Aaron Rodgers is healthy, I don't really care how many games they've had to gel or not gel. He's going to be dangerous, and you can lose that game. I think
here's the thing is that we have seen Hall of Fame quarterbacks struggle on a new team starting out the gate. So it will not be some unheard of thing that he is going to have a slow start. The difference is that where it may take, like Derek Carr, it may take him 8 weeks to get prepared. It may take Aaron Rodgers 3 or 4 weeks. I don't think it will be 2 unless he plays a lot in preseason, which I'm doubtful.
I follow you there. And then your second point on the schedule.
I feel like y'all really kind of like didn't really lift up how fantastic it is that they face 4 rookie quarterbacks. Like I think that's the best part of the schedule. If I'm looking at it, is that they get to face 4 rookies, and we know because history has told us at max 2 of these quarterbacks are going to be good. And whether they're going to be good by the time that you play them in this year or not is good. So you're looking at best 50% of these quarterbacks that you are going to face are going to suck. And I think this is going to be, that's a really good thing to emphasize, that because you're talking about 6 quarterbacks got drafted. You're facing 4 of them, but out of that 6, only 1 or 2 are going to be good. So there's a good chance you could maybe face the 4 bad ones out of this class. You don't really know. Unlikely, but I think it's good. I think it's great to get Caleb out of the gate because you can easily shell shock him. I believe then it's goes Drake May after that, and then
week 9,
yeah, then JJ McCarthy, and then Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels probably become broken by then. So I mean, you may not even face Jaden Daniels. Maybe facing Marcus, which there you go.
Well, and I think I said this, 4 more games at least, if I'm doing my math right. I mean, if you count Jordan Love as a second-year starter, which he is,
right.
Now he's not a second-year player, but you got 4 more games with second-year quarterbacks, and then you've got Jordan Love, who's a second-year starter, and you go down the list, and it's like, no, you're right. Maybe we like missed the forest through the trees going to. Actually, what I would argue we did is we maybe went too deep into the rookie evaluation and said, like, look, they're going to be much better later on in theory. So it's not great to get 3 of them later on. And I, missing the moment to say at the start, clearing your throat, sort of caveating, would you rather be playing 8 quarterbacks in 8 games that have been drafted in the last 2 years? Yes, that's a good schedule to have than playing 7 Hall of Famers. Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I just think that
right.
later in the year is not going to really matter for probably 2 of these guys. Because I mean, the chances are that they are going to suck. But I mean, that's just what decades of history have told us. I think it was on this show or maybe Football and Other Efforts where we went through and talked about how you may have like 1 elite guy out of this class, and at best you're probably going to have 2. Because I guess we were talking about Will Levis and all that last summer. There's a good chance that with CJ Stroud being the guy that he is, the rest of these guys could probably not be that good, in the rest of that draft class. But there's a good chance with 6 quarterbacks. I would be very surprised if the 4 quarterbacks that you face this year are average to above average, even by the time that you play him, even later in the year.
Yeah, I like even. And I think ultimately this is the most important point, which is there are some really difficult quarterbacks on here, really good players. Aaron Rodgers, Tua Tagovailoa, Josh Allen, Jared Goff, and that offense on the road has been very, very good. Just got paid. You got two with CJ Stroud, 2 with Lawrence, 2 with Richardson. Don't know how good any of those 3 could be at the end of the year. And Joe Burrow. again, Rodgers and Burrow and Tua have major health issues. So I think one of the main points that we were trying to make is, and I think ultimately you probably agree with this, is like you cannot tell me how difficult or not difficult a schedule really is at any point until the year actually starts, because you don't know what any team's going to be. We chalked up 4 wins to Indianapolis and Houston last year. They went 0-4. And it's just, what I don't like is, and I've heard this, and I'm not going to use any names here because I don't care. I'm not going to call out my mentor. But I think when you go through a schedule and you go fucking wins and losses on a schedule in the middle of May or June or even July, I just think it's a waste of time. I think it's a waste of time.
I'm with you. I don't, my nonchalant attitude or uncaring attitude about schedule releases and all that kind of stuff gets misconstrued as that I'm annoyed by it. I have no care for it. I do do an article series, but I try to look at it from perspective of like, what could have gone wrong? What could happen? Like, if everything goes right, what will happen? If what's some interesting facts about the matchup? What's new for that team? Like, what's going on in the opponent's team's world that is interesting that you may not know of? It's less about wins and losses for me. I mean, everybody does a schedule prediction because that's just kind of how it goes and how it naturally, a natural discussion is. But like, I thought there were some really great schedule releases. I think a couple of years ago when LA, set the bar by doing the anime, that really upped everyone else's game in the league. And there were some really good ones this year. I'm not a fan of the Titans one. I'm sorry.
Oh, I don't think they should
did it last year. The sequels are never as good as the.
I love that you said this. I showed my wife, and one of the things that I find about sports that tells me that like sometimes I'm missing something, right? Because I'm like you sometimes where I'm like too deep in the weeds and I don't like the generic basic, but like sometimes that's the way you have to do it. Last year's Titans video made it into everyone's timeline. It made it into my wife's timeline,
and last year's was great.
Yeah, right. If it makes it into my wife's timeline, then I know something's really important. If it crosses out of Titans Twitter and out of like, our conversations and into like the wife's timeline, then I know it's something that everyone's talking about. So last year's video is spectacular. Don't think any team should ever do another one. Like any team. Yeah. And that includes the Titans. I showed her the second one and she was kind of like, she laughed like once or twice. I laughed once or twice, and then I was like, I don't know why they went back to the well. And she goes, yeah, you shouldn't.
The guy
shouldn't
wearing
have gone back
the
to the
Amy
well.
Adams Strunk shirt, not knowing who the Jaguars were, like you're wearing a shirt with the owner. I think that one's a little scripted. I'm sorry.
I agree. It felt a little
unbelievable.
It felt a little fake and forced. And again, it's not that they like.
Here's the problem. They did 2 last year, right? They did the comedy one, and then they did the one taking the tour of the bar and everything. Yeah. Maybe you should have only done one last year and saved the other one for this year.
You did use up a lot of good ammunition last year. You got to keep some of that powder dry, man. You got to wait.
I think Mike vehemently disagrees because he said they should do this and every year and never change it, and I think that's ridiculous because you never grow, and then you're going to be. I guarantee if they do it again next year, you'll see more complaints, and then the year after that, you'll see more complaints.
I agree.
Different.
It always fades, and sort of evolution is required. I agree with that, but I will say, I think
how many times can we hear Uncle Ben say, "Great power comes great responsibility"? I think we all know the Spider-Man story by now, right?
What I think is that he, I think they overthought it by bringing back the whatever her name is, the Red Stallions girl. Like I agree that if you had just tried to find as many drunk people as possible on Broadway, which should not be hard, and that clearly don't know about football, and then get them to be dumb. That is very entertaining and can be humorous and can be repetitively humorous and funny no matter what. But I think they overthought by bringing her in. I'm like, look, she's the most attractive of the group. We're going to bring her back and we're going to have her run around town. They overthought the whole thing. It just wasn't as funny.
Yeah.
It wasn't as funny because like that first one on the first video last year when they dropped the music from NFL films, I was just dying.
I feel like the music got edited quicker too, is a little bit more jarring. But this is now we're getting into the weeds.
I know.
It's not my favorite.
Video.
It wasn't as bad as the Jags X-Men or Jags 95, which is an X-Men 97 ripoff, which didn't even use the best theme music for a TV show of all time. Didn't even use it. They had all the power screwed up. And then if you're going to be Jags 95, shouldn't you use the Jags players from 1995 and not the current Jaguars? Like, it doesn't. I'm out. I'm just out on. I that was the worst one. So at least they weren't. That was a nerd hate one.
I agree. Marcus says the Chargers one was great again.
Yeah,
D good corrects me. The Red Stallions. I forgot about the RAR part. The original, man, it's the best. Don't go back to the well.
The original is fantastic.
Don't go back to the well. I agree. All right, quickly. There is some. There was some stadium stuff. Not a lot of news. I'm curious about Titans fans, and you can be included in this if you want to, Zach. But I'm curious about you guys listening. Like, are you actually going to go to this Titans house thing and like check out the model that is apparently this like world class model that looks amazing?
Downtown for any reason.
It's in Germantown. It's in Germantown.
Maybe if Lauren takes me to the Optimist, I'll go. But I'm not going to. Yeah, I'm not going to German. I'm not. No. Why do I need? What am I, Zoolander? Do I need to go see a stadium for ants and like? Ooh, I could laser point at my stadium and see where I sit.
How are we gonna
give a shit about that?
How are we gonna watch the Super Bowl if we can't even fit through the door?
Right. Yeah, I'm out. I think that it is
so,
not.
Listen, PK hyping it up does not normally happen. He's not a hype man normally, and he said, "Look, you gotta go to the Titans house to go check out this model." So some information from some of the.
But he also has he has this idea that he's more handsome than me, so obviously, clearly, something is wrong with his eyesight.
As I said, you have much better hair. You got better hair.
I'm objectively a more handsome human.
I don't have an opinion. I mean, we can all agree that I am more handsome than both of you. That's all we really need to discuss here on the show.
You have that rugged handsomeness that
Yeah. All right.
That high school quarterback, offensive lineman that goes into and be's a cop kind of handsome. Cop.
I think all of that was a compliment. Perhaps all of it was an insult. I'm not sure. So you can go visit this thing, but you got to like sign up and whatever. 40% of PSLs are going to be under $3,500, which again, their whole goal is, we don't want to price out the average fan. I do think the Predators had this problem after their cup run. They priced out a lot of their blue collar fans, which made Bridgestone Arena a fabulous place to watch a game, a rowdy place to watch a game. I think they priced out a lot of those folks after getting good. And as I say, lower bowl at Bridgestone Arena, whole lot of quarter zips, not nearly as many hoodies. And so I think that's what can happen. If you're telling me just the PSL is $3,500 and 60% of them are more than that, you're talking about a pretty high-end clientele. And the vast majority of diehard Titans fans that we sort of interact with, that I see, it's not a downtown urban crowd. It's like sort of the concentric circles around downtown that kind of go out into the communities in the suburbs. And those are blue-collar folk that are not spending. And he said, $75,000 for just that PSL. That's before you purchase the tickets, of course. So the prices are going to be a big discussion if and when they do hit the free market. So I've been warning you guys about that for a long time. Every seat, and this is the one that got Zach excited. Every seat in the building
I cared about.
Every seat in the building will be padded, so your bum. It's gonna be nice and comfy.
You would think the Senior Bowl would have, or at least sell. Okay, this is my big complaint about when we go to the Senior Bowl, because you just sit in bleachers, right? Yeah. And on the media side is just bleachers, and but they don't sell like the things that you can attach to give yourself a back to them or anything at the stadium. I don't know why they don't do that. That's free money for you, Senior Bowl, that I have just given you, because that almost everybody would do it. But yeah, I think padded seats is awesome, and I commend them for understanding that everybody's fat, lazy, and tired of being miserable when they're sitting in those seats.
It's 3 years away. Who cares at this point? Sabine giving us some perspective there. I'm with Bo, actually, though. He says, look, come on, man, those models are cool as hell. I used to go to the Langford building at A&M during finals to look at all the models and the architecture the students created. I agree, as a building.
That's an entirely different thing than going to see one model in Germantown.
I would want to.
Well, go.
I'm going to.
Go. You live like go after this show. You live 5 minutes away. You can do it.
I can't this week. I'm busy. But yes, I do want to go. OTAs, by the way, start on Tuesday at 11:25 a.m. So that's another quick note. We'll touch on a little bit later on in the show. All right, Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group. Before we get to our main portion of the pod today, Sinkers Beverages, the #1 liquor store in Nashville, as voted on by you, the Nashvillians, according to the Nashville Scene. And of course, Bluegrass Beverages, their sister store up in Hendersonville. You can get to both of those locations. Fantastic selection of beer, great selection of wine. They will walk you through whatever you need, whatever occasion you need your alcohol for. A lot of non-alcoholic stuff. They got ciders, they got THC drinks. They got all kinds of stuff in there. Great bourbon selection as well. Join the in crowd. That will give you access to a lot of cool events and cool allocations and all kinds of stuff. So make sure you check that out. And then also the Kingston Group, buildkg.com. You guys know the drill with them. I guess Chef Rand says this. I need a safety signing up. This is a tough one to say. I need a
sometime
safety
in 2024
date
prediction.
prediction.
I gave it to you. It'll be sometime in 2024.
There you go.
They will sign. They will at least sign one safety.
I agree. Is it Simmons or May, in your opinion, or they go lower?
I don't know. I'm just saying that it could happen in September 2024. Just some scrub gets signed to the practice squad. They'll sign a safety at some point.
What if it happens?
I'm being facetious with the signing date prediction.
December of 24.
Yeah, it could be.
We'll just wait.
They'll at least have signed one safety by December 31st, 2024.
There you go. I like it. I do. Look, there you go. Okay, so Brian Callahan sits down with Robert Mays, Football Show Athletic. It is a very good listen. I recommend it all the time, so make sure you go check it out. But a long form sort of, I think it was about 35 minutes long, where he really gets into the weeds on a lot of different things. And yes, he absolutely talks about coaching with his father. He does talk about that.
But he at least added something very, very new that was very interesting and dropped other tidbits that are very important that I haven't seen anybody talk about yet.
So you want to start with the Will Levis part of this and then work to the Brian Callahan side of this? Because I thought the coaching, his insight into how he's going to coach his staff and what he's got to coach himself to do, I thought that was very interesting as well. So I think we should start with Levis and kind of work our way out and see where we go with this conversation.
Yeah.
Because it's always fun to listen to a coach who's clearly trying to be open and wants to give good information and have smart conversations. But also at this stage, he's never called plays. He's never coached a game with Will Levis. There's still so much new. And so there's a lot of referencing back to the Joe Burrow relationship conversation, Gary Kubiak references back to Peyton Manning. And I thought I'll give you my major sort of Will Levis thing, and then I'll see what you think. And maybe if you agree, then we're definitely on the same wavelength here. But I thought the two different types of offensive systems that he described in this conversation, in very broad terms, in the NFL were sort of quarterback-centric systems where the quarterback has control and freedom to operate and manipulate and run the offense. And then these systems that are more rigid to sort of control the quarterback, to put him in a best situation to sort of maximize efficiency with what the coach views is the appropriate way. Think Kyle Shanahan and Matt LaFleur running Green Bay's offense with Jordan Love and San Francisco's offense with Brock Purdy as sort of system-driven offenses where the system dictates what the quarterback should do. And then think of, Joe Burrow with Brian Callahan, where Joe Burrow is in charge of the offense. And the way he made it sound, and I agree with this, is there's just not many guys in the NFL that can run a quarterback-centric system, but that his goal with Will Levis, which includes being extremely smart, processing quickly, and being accurate, is how he described Joe Burrow. He wants to take time to elevate Will Levis to that stage at some point. That is his goal with Will Levis. Can he get there? I don't know. We don't know. He doesn't know. Will doesn't know. We'll find out. But that sort of difference is that it should give us insight into what type of offense we should expect in this particular calendar year, in my opinion.
Yeah, it was interesting because a lot of people are like really thinking that he's trying to. I saw a radio show today, kind of like say I saw a clip of it, and they were kind of saying that we don't know if he can be the guy that Brian Callahan wants him to be, and they were taking this as talking about Joe Burrow and the year two really being able to put his stamp on the offense and feel comfortable talking to him and stuff like that. That is the level of success. That's something that dictates whether Will Levis is successful with Brian Callahan and the Tennessee Titans. And I think that's an entirely different way to take it than what it was intended. And to me, it's like he mentions because we have talked about it, right? We have talked about when Brian Callahan was going in through the interview process, I wrote about it extensively at Stacking the Inbox. We talked about on the show about how Brian Callahan, one of the biggest things is that he knows that different quarterbacks need different things. And I'm sure that Brian Callahan would love for Will Levis to reach that height, right? To reach that height where he can come in and say, look, man, this run pass, because of the Joe Burrow run pass thing, just like
That's a great story.
It murdered me while I was driving the car. Like, I was just laughing because I'm like, I could not imagine
Every
quarterback
Titans
going
fan.
up to Mike Vrabel and saying, hey, going run pass, even though they won the game, right? Because that would be the thing, is that if the quarterback went to Mike Vrabel and said, hey, man, this run pass thing makes it really hard for me to pass on third down. And even though they won, Joe Burrow still had, the balls to go up and say, can we stop doing that? And they stopped doing it. And I'm sure every quarterback would love to do that, by the way. I'd love to say that. But I think it talks more about the openness between Joe Burrow, Brian Callahan, and those guys, that coaching staff.
Yep.
But I do think it's interesting that people are now wanting, because we have talked about all along, you can't expect Will Levis to be Joe Burrow. And maybe this is a disservice to Will Levis inadvertently by Brian Callahan by continually bringing up Joe Burrow, but that is going to be the guy that he brings up the most, because that is the rookie, the only real true rookie that he really developed. You could say maybe a little bit of Stafford, but really from the process of bringing him into the culture, the indoctrination and everything, it's really just Joe Burrow. And that's his most recent experience. We're going to hear a lot of comparisons come out of Brian Callahan's mouth, but that's not him putting the expectations or saying that for Will Levis to be a success, he has to be Joe Burrow.
No, I think, if you ask me, he said this multiple times about Joe Burrow, but also about his offense, and then also about Will Levis, which is, he said he wants a jump in completion percentage, a more efficient passer from Will Levis. That's something we've all said. So we're all on the same page there. But it's about he basically continually said, the processing speed and the accuracy is what makes Joe Burrow so special. And that's what made Peyton Manning so special. And that's what made a lot of the guys that he's worked with, and some of the guys that are the quarterback-centric offenses, that's what makes them special. And I don't necessarily, I think, what did he call it? He called it the wild horse rider stuff about Will Levis. He said sometimes when he did some of that wild horse rider stuff, that it was a good thing because the team bought into what he was doing. But you could hear Brian Callahan kind of saying it like, but we don't necessarily want him to do that too much. We don't want him to go off script too much, which he didn't say, but I was kind of listening to his voice tone, and he kind of like paused, and I was like, oh, to me, that's what he's saying is we're going to build a system that Will Levis will maximize Will Levis' talents, that big arm down the field, the athleticism, the sort of his personality type, the fire, the leadership. We're going to maximize all the stuff that we know he does really, really well, while trying to develop the stuff that he doesn't, which all is very common sense, but that it's going to take time. If he ever gets to the point where he becomes the quarterback-centric offense, it's going to take time, and that he has to earn it. And I think it's very normal. Otherwise, if you have a coach who's like, I'm not willing to adapt to my players' strengths and weaknesses, get that fucking guy out of there.
Well, but here's the thing is that there's a bunch of coaches that do that, right? I mean, that's why so few of these quarterbacks really truly hit in the first rounds, because there are teams that do not take the time to make this next step. Now, maybe we'll see less of that going forward, because like we have talked about and alluded to earlier in the show, and like you all talked about last week, is the emotional intelligence portion of being an NFL head coach is becoming so much more important. And maybe we'll see less of that, but there are still going to be those coaches that are like that. I mean, that's why a lot of coaches are out of the league, right? Like, I mean, not just Mike Vrabel or anything, but I'm just talking about in general over the last 20 years. We have seen, we've seen it here many times. I mean, Vince Young and Jeff Fisher did not match. Really Marcus and Mike Vrabel didn't get along. I mean, they got along, but they didn't really mesh in stylistically. There's just a lot of things like, I mean, really talk about Ken Wisenhunt trying to do his offense. I think Ken Wisenhunt's a perfect contrast, real in one big thing
to all
in
humans.
Brian Callahan and what he said is the pivot, right? If something's not working, we're not going to keep doing it. And listen, you can say the same thing about Mike Vrabel. He did not like to pivot. But if something is not working, we're not going to do it. And I think that's a big thing that a lot of coaches don't do. And so I know that we say it really sounds like common sense, but it's kind of like I can't remember what the subject was a couple weeks ago. But I was like, it sounds like common sense, right? You think that every NFL team would do it, but there's a lot of teams that do not do any kind of adjustment all year long. There's a lot of teams that draft the wrong quarterback for their system and they do not adapt their system around it. There's a lot of teams that slowly build around their quarterback. I mean, the Tennessee Titans have amped it up to 11. They have decided that, hey, Will Levis is we saw enough on tape, kind of like what we did. We saw enough on tape last year to know that Will Levis has got all the arm talent. He's got the can-do attitude, whatever you want to call it. He's got it. We're going to load up around Will Levis. We're going to adapt a system around Will Levis, and we are going to listen to Will Levis. We're going to listen to our players. We're going to adapt. We're going to pivot. It's something that I got to learn because he talked about Gary Kubiak was one of the greatest coaches that he's been around, one of the greatest play callers.
He said natural play caller. Yeah.
But he pivoted. And that was the word that he used a lot that I really enjoyed from a long-time watcher of the Tennessee Titans, dating back from Jeff Fisher to Mike Vrabel. The pivot eluded, and we're basically getting into Friends territory, moving the couch up the stairs. But the pivot has been a struggle for every coach from Jeff Fisher to now. And we're not talking just in game. We're talking even after games and modifying game plans for future success. A good example of this, and I know it's just fresh, and I'll wrap it up right here on this last one.
Because I want to spend a lot more time on the Callahan stuff. I think there's a couple more Levis points. So,
well, this is going to tie it back to Will Levis. Remember last year, and I can't remember the situation, but someone brought up to Mike Vrabel the something about Will Levis and his EPA and his completion percentage was higher on a certain play. Why aren't you doing this play? And then he went into that big word vomit thing and he never did it. Like he just refused to ever do whatever it was. That's not going to be the case with Brian Callahan and Will Levis. So when you see something, and it's something that we'll talk about with Bill Callahan, but when you see something in the data, when something is brought to Brian Callahan's attention in the data, whether that's by his own research or something, or maybe even Will Levis says I'm more comfortable and the data reflects that, he's going to pivot. And I think that's really important for Will Levis in this year when we're talking about all the quarterbacks that got drafted last year, and you're talking about the measure of success for those quarterbacks and the rate of success for those quarterbacks. It's really important to have this kind of coach that is going to be able to adapt on the fly for Will Levis. And you're right, it's completion percentage
has to be better
and decision making.
So that's ultimately where like my sort of like final point on Levis is more like daydreaming off into the future. And if you've hired the right coach who's a quarterback friendly offensive guru who asks opinions and listens to them, which is what he said in the interview, who is willing to admit that he's a green play caller and green pivoter in game, that you've got to learn how to, in the game, it's about feel and adjustment, and you just can't do that until you've actually done it. But he's done a lot of studying and down and distance and situational stuff. Obviously, the list of names that he kind of mentioned, Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, Gary Kubiak, Zach Taylor, Matt LaFleur, okay, all makes sense to him, and makes sense that those structures are fairly rigid with what they do, and to give the quarterback a clearer decision-making process. And I think while all of that stuff is really, really, really important, basically he's talking about keeping – the Titans were very good at the scripted part, right? The first 15 plays. The Titans were pretty good at that a lot of the time. They'd come out, they have a game plan, it was scripted, it was prepared, and they executed it pretty well. And he talked a lot about, like, how do we maintain that edge later in the game, whether it's formations, whether it's down and distance, keeping defenses honest, keeping them guessing, not knowing what's coming. And so all that stuff is really, really great stuff to say. What you have to do with Will Levis, and this is ultimately the question we just don't know until time, I do think he is wired in a way to be a guy who can run an offense as a quarterback-centric offense. The question that I have, it's the same question we've all had about Will Levis, and I don't know if you can answer this. Anyone, not meaning you or me, but just like in general. Like, to the accuracy thing You can know where to go with the ball. You can process it quickly. You can be tough as shit. You can be 6'4", 235. You can run a 4.6. You can have all the support of your teammates and have good receivers on the outside. But if you cannot hit the tiniest window, it won't work. And it doesn't mean you can't win in a more Brock Purdy, Kyle Shanahan, Jordan Love, Matt LaFleur type of system where it's more about the playmakers and the decision making. You can do that. But to be Mahomes and Burrow and Peyton Manning and these teams that win Super Bowls with that caliber quarterback, you have to package it with the accuracy. And that is the one thing that I think Will Levis is totally wired in a way to become a guy that leads an offense. But I don't know if he'll ever be accurate enough. And maybe he will, but maybe he won't. I just don't know. That's the one thing I just
rare,
I don't know.
Right?
It is.
I mean, it's very, very rare to see a inaccurate college quarterback, no matter the surroundings, does not matter, because there are many examples of people in good surroundings. It is a cold, hard fact that completion percentage and accuracy in college really translate and weighs heavily to the chances of your success in the pros. Josh Allen was an anomaly because that was Josh Allen's big knock, because even at Wyoming, he had a bad completion percentage. He was an anomaly, and it took him a while. It does not mean that it has to take Will Levis that much longer, because I do think that some of his accuracy issues would be on the offensive line in that. But there are a lot of times that we saw him take unnecessary sacks in college, that took unnecessary sacks in the pros. And not every window is so much smaller in the NFL than it is even in college. So like, you have to be able to make the throws. You have to get your timing, because like, I feel like for Will Levis, it's almost a timing issue, and his timing mixed with his power. Right? He's got this arm, so I feel like he holds on the ball just a tad bit longer because he knows he can make the window, trying to see if the guy can get open a little bit quicker.
Yeah.
We know that he takes the deep shots. And so that was one thing that he talked about on this podcast. We had talked about it before. One of the biggest knocks on Will Levis, there are times that he'd rather take the deep shot instead of taking the wide open guy 5 yards in front of him. That improves your accuracy metric, right? That like, if you're taking that guy and you're hitting that guy for an easy completion, that helps rather than taking 2 or 3 deep to intermediate deep shots when you don't have to. That's kind of where he's got to rein him in. He talks about it. It's like, I got to get him to take, when he's saying I need to get his completion percentage up, he's saying I need to get him to recognize and see the field to take in that sometimes taking the guy 5 yards in front of you is way better than trying to go for the kill shot.
So Chef Rand says accuracy can be improved, though. Did Brees improve his accuracy from San Diego? I think using Drew Brees as an example of this is a terrible idea, because I think Drew Brees is one of the most accurate quarterbacks I've ever seen, and that comes from high school all the way through the Purdue system, all the way into the NFL. I think accuracy is like a few other things. Pitching velocity, right? I think you can practice your pitching velocity. You can work and build muscle and get stronger, but you either throw 91 or you throw 101. I don't think you can get a couple miles an hour of strength on there. 3-point shooting is another one, or free throw shooting. You can practice and rep and get better and marginally improve your 3-point shooting. You can go from 32% to 37%, but you can't go from average 3-point shooter to one of the best in the NBA, or free throw. You can practice and go from like 68% to like 75%, but you're never going to be a 92% free throw shooter. Like shooting free throws, I think accuracy in football is the same way. You either have it or you don't. You can marginally improve it. You can improve it with a system that allows for the quarterback to make smarter decisions to improve the efficiency of the offense. But if you are asking me, can you change the way a human being puts a football 30 yards downfield into a window and make that basket smaller? I just think you got it or you don't.
And friend, for really, that's not Will Levis's issue, right? I mean, Will Levis's issue is just taking the easy shots. It's not necessarily that he can't make the easy shots, right? I mean, I'm not sitting here saying that he's inaccurate on short throws and that's why he's not taking them, right? I'm saying that, I know it's more the completion percentage, and I get what you're saying, but we know that Will Levis has the arm talent to be accurate. He has the deep ball accuracy, in my opinion. He's got he's got a pretty deep ball. He can make any throw. It's just about, can he get his timing and rhythm down? And he may have, and this may be an issue where it is maybe majority of the offensive line or something, because maybe he can't get into a rhythm. But I also think there's this, and I'd rather, and we both agree, we'd rather have the guy that can shoot it deep and zip that ball 50 yards down the field and is willing to take those shots and rein him back in than trying to take the little scaredy boy quarterback that is too scared to take those shots.
Yeah, I agree.
So I do think that, like, I think it was 58% completion percentage, and his expected completion percentage was in the negatives, but not by much. I think he was supposed to be like 59% or 60%.
He's never going to be a 70% completion percentage guy.
Right.
He's never going to
be there. Get him to 65, and that's the plan, right? The plan is to get him to 65, which is a pretty normal completion percentage. But to do that, and to me, it's like, that is going to be more in line with changing his view of the field in real time, not necessarily his skill level. I think it's going to be more of, I got to take this easy shot, and that's going to be a direct reflection of being able to prolong drives, being able to improve your completion percentage. I think a lot of that will be in that area of the field.
And Chef Rand says this, efficiency versus accuracy are two different things. I think you can go from 58% to 63% based on decision making, right? Based purely on the system. Brian Callahan, improved weapons on the outside, improved pass catchers at every position, improved experience, improved offensive line. He was clearly rushing his way through things, not only because of the offensive line and the receiving core, but because he was a rookie. So all that stuff,
and he was also only targeting one player, right?
Right.
He's only targeting, DeAndre Hopkins.
All that stuff should be better.
Now it's going to be a little bit different.
All that stuff should be better, but ultimately, I don't think you can fix. Like, if you put targets 15, 20, 25, 30, 35 yards downfield, put them at all those markers, right? And you put like a 1 foot circle versus a 2 foot circle versus a 3 foot circle versus a 4 foot circle. There's certain guys that can hit the 1 foot circle consistently 70% of the time. And there's guys that can hit the 3 foot circle and the 4 foot circle. And I don't think that changes. I don't think you can make that, that much different. I think you kind of are what you are. But the difference in the NFL between 62% and 70% is like a couple of, in the NFL, the windows are inches of difference. We're talking about getting it over a fingertip, over a linebacker and underneath the safety, or around a cornerback's reach. Those are the things that make the difference. So Ed says Brett Favre was 62% for his career. He also led the NFL in history of interceptions. I don't want that.
When I think of Brett Favre, I don't think of accuracy, by the way.
No, I think, you know what I think of? I think of a guy with a huge arm who likes to go all wild horse rider.
which is fine, but you can't listen. You think that 62% sounds low, but when you're comparing it to 58% and how many balls you'll have to complete and throw, how much that adds in yardage, right? For Will Levis, for him to go from 58% to 62%, that probably adds wins, that probably adds yardage, that probably adds touchdowns. Like that's a big jump for Will Levis this year. The 62% would be a huge jump for Will Levis.
I agree.
And I would be fine with a 62% Will Levis. It's the 58%. It takes a lot to go from 58 to 62. And I think a lot of people do need to realize that, how much it takes. I mean, if you talk about what Patrick Mahomes did his last year of college, he was 65.7% completion percentage, if I recall correctly. Let's see here. 65.7. And his career average is 66.5. So you want to see a better jump than that, but that lets you know that he had a good baseline of accuracy and completion percentage, whereas Will Levis has not had that yet. Will Levis does have to grow in this thing, and Brian Callahan is telling you as such.
Yep. So Brian specifically, who he is as a coach through this conversation, I found to be interesting because Robert Mays pressed him on, hey, and we've had this conversation, I think, a number of times. Paul and I talked about it on Thursday as well. The newer generation of player expects a newer type of coaching from the coaches. And while I don't think that Vrabel is as old school as he is easily painted, I think he had a better communication style with parents and with players and their families and their needs and the psychology of all that stuff. It was always interesting to me how much the players appreciated that. I don't think that he is as sort of like Neanderthalish as people make him out to be. But nothing I've heard from any coach maybe ever sounds as emotionally intelligent as Brian Callahan does. It doesn't mean that it's going to work. So I just always say that about everything. But emotional intelligence to me is about self-awareness. It's about control. It's about psychology of understanding where a player is in his life and what else could be affecting his focus. It's about the holistic approach to like human nature, and then creating an environment where feedback and there's a two-way communication style that I think is very beneficial. And I do think Vrabel did a lot of that, but not like this. This feels like a new wave of coaches that are very young, as they said. And I think the things he talks about are like, I don't want to have to coach my coaching staff to act a certain way as a human, to be a person. Like, I don't need to be coaching adults to be adults. They need to already be adults. And basically he said, that's why we put together the staff we put together. We have a bunch of people that already kind of fit into our cultural mold. They're going to be thoughtful. They're going to be nuanced. They're going to be emotionally intelligent. They're going to be balanced. They're going to have work and life and understand all of that with the players. And I think that's really, really, that's what matters. Is it does. We don't know if Denard Wilson's going to call the right play on 3rd and 8. We don't know. We think he's pretty good at it. But what Brian doesn't have to worry about, and he can spend time coaching Will Levis, is that he doesn't have to worry about how Denard Wilson is communicating with L'Jarius Sneed and how he's working with Amani Hooker, right, or what T'Vondre Sweat has to work. T'Vondre Sweat's going to have to work through a lot of stuff, just like a normal rookie, but with a little extra, added on. And that's going to have to be handled by people who are already fully formed that don't need to be told how to coach or how to teach or how to be a certain type of person. And that, I think if they can get that right out of the gate, it gives them a major head start on building a culture. And I don't know if that's right, but that he feels like it's right.
Well, and I think most of the teams do that. The successful teams do some form of that to a high degree. I'd venture to say Houston's probably that kind of an environment, because a lot of this is from San Francisco, from LA, and all that kind of stuff. So I would say that is that kind of situation in when you have been a Titans fan and you are craving something different. You are getting it now. You're finally getting what you have been craving even before Vrabel, even before the success that Vrabel obviously had and the impact on this team, even before Mike Mularkey and the turnaround from there. You're getting the stuff that you really crave, right? Like, you are craving a new direction, a new kind of coaching style. And sometimes that when you're looking for a new philosophy, a new culture, a new offense, that means that you're going to have a new process and a new way of doing things. And this is part of that process. And I agree with everything you said, because I look at it from the Denard Wilson thing. You said something about Denard Wilson. He may not call the right play on 3rd and 8, right? Okay. But at least everybody's going to know why he called it, right? Like, they're not just teaching, you're going to be at X spot. After the ball snapped, here's where you're going. Well, here's why you're going there. Here's how you get there. That's what they're teaching. Because if you listen to what Colton Dow said, I don't know if you've seen this clip, but Colton Dow was on a podcast, a very lesser known podcast, and I maybe in like Titans Coliseum or something. Someone may have the name in there. I re-X'd it while I was at the barbecue contest, and I listened to it, but I didn't commit anything to memory besides the words of Colton Dow. And he said, we are learning. It feels like I'm learning how to play wide receiver in the NFL. Like, we are learning the why behind stuff. And this is something that I've talked about throughout this coaching process, this coaching search, is that like all these players, specifically, I went deep into this with Mike McDonald, where that's where Denard Wilson just came from. But all of the players have talked about, when talking about Denard Wilson, when talking about Brian Callahan, when talking about Mike McDonald, Aaron Glenn, they all had this common theme, right? All these coaches had this common theme of the players knew the why. They knew why they were doing something, why they were being told what to do, why they were being coached this way, why the route is ran this way, why their hand placement needs to be here, why it needs to be happen here. And the fact that Colton Dow, who probably thought, oh, nobody's going to hear me say this on this podcast, but like said that this is new to him. I mean, maybe that says a lot more about Rob Moore than anything else, but that's a pretty big new thing for this group, right?
Craig
this
Aukerman
generation. Yeah. This generation in particular, my generation has always been inquisitive, right? Why? Why? I think my mom said that was like my first like word was why. Or it probably was no, but she's like, you ask why all the time because we have this innate craving to figure out. I'm being told to do something. I'm not challenging you on that. Why am I doing this? It's like, I want to understand the reasoning behind this so I can understand, right? Like it's a way for us to understand things, basic things. And it really feels like this staff has taken that to maybe not an extreme degree, but a more extreme degree than what we are used to because we are understanding the why, right? Like we as media members or as fans with the content that they're given, a 45-minute interview on The Athletic that is not in like the Titans media room, or I think actually this was,
Actually,
but
it was.
like not being held hostage, by, someone behind the camera and all this stuff. And the stuff that we have heard from this coaching staff, we are now understanding the why. Because there's a lot of times where like we don't understand why they do this or why they did that in dating back to Jeff Fisher, and we never got that answer.
Well,
like
even
when we asked the coach.
Even to stretching or to strength and conditioning or to nutrition, we're hearing some more whys already. I think the way he just talked about it was very quick when he talked about Denard Wilson sort of actually scheming. And he's like, "Oh, I want to play an aggressive coverage." He was the best pass defense in the NFL, and he's going to play aggressive defense against the pass because he knows how to put the players in the right side. Like he was sort of explaining, this is why Denard Wilson, at his attitude, his scheme, and then he was like, "Oh, and he's very great at communicating with the play. Like he knows why he's asking a player to do a thing." So he was talking through all of that stuff. And again, if you haven't listened to it, I recommend talking about problem solving in real time, being humble enough to admit that he needs to listen to players, being humble enough to admit that he is green when it comes to in-game adjustments and calling plays in the game, and then pivoting. All that stuff is sort of very different from an NFL coach. Just acknowledging that emotional intelligence is a bigger part of the role is different. And he spent the first few minutes talking about how large the role is in general and how he's got to go out and do all these other things. And that's just sort of
insane.
That's just the nature of the
they
beast.
have to pick what's on the wall and what color the walls are. And I'm like, the head coach is doing that? Is that what Chad Brinker's job title is, or something?
Somebody under Chad Brinker should be the one doing that, actually. So
yeah,
it should be somebody in Amy Adams.
They need a paint room specialist. I know that there is like a psychology around which paint to choose and everything, but I don't think the head coach is the guy that's certified to do that.
All right, so
no
on Thursday we'll talk a little bit about what we kind of see and what we saw at OTA. So we'll have a little bit more to discuss on Thursday, of course, with all these things. I'm not wrapping it up here, but Thursday we'll be back. Real quickly, as programming note, Thursday we'll be back to break down all the OTAs, but then on Monday, on Memorial Day, we will not be on. We'll be off. So everybody, we do appreciate it. You guys enjoy your weekend. And then we'll have some fun stuff planned for you guys next Thursday. But we will actually have players on the field on Tuesday, so we'll get to talk about that on Thursday. But appreciate to Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group for making sure this product is free for you every time. So give us a thumbs up on the YouTube there. Give us a subscription. Share the product. Write us a review on the podcast app. I know it's what everybody asks you guys to do, but we really, really do appreciate it. It does help folks find the product a little bit more, and then we can grow the audience and reinvest back into the show to make it even better for you guys. So I do appreciate all your support, all your questions, et cetera, et cetera. So, but help us with that. You had a couple more. You had one more thing you wanted to add on the Callahan. So you want to talk about his dad?
Well, it's Brian's dad. They talked about how he's doing the run game. And now, listen, this is kind of common for offensive line coaches around the league. They're usually the ones that are in charge of the run game. But that's something that we haven't really talked about we talk about a lot about the pass protection, right? That Brian's dad's going to give us, in terms of that, the teaching and all that kind of stuff. But we haven't really talked about is the teaching of whatever scheme that he may use, which sounds like the way that kind of Brian put it is that it's a Brian's dad's scheme. It's not really going to be gap. It's not really going to be zone. It's just his scheme, whatever he feels is going to work.
He says
he's designing it.
He said it's going to be different than what they ran in Cincinnati, and it's going to be, he said that's what's going to make the Titans offense the Titans offense. To make it unique is Brian's offense passing with his father's running offense.
If you go to YouTube and search Alex Gibbs blocking seminar or offensive line seminar, you'll see these really old clips of Alex Gibbs, who is the godfather of the wide zone scheme, and it teaches you a lot, right? And I look at it and I go, and I think we haven't spent enough time talking about the impact of the run game that Brian's dad will have. And I love that he's like, it's his bread and butter, which it should be. I mean, because it's like I said, typically a lot of your offensive line coaches are your run game coordinators and all that kind of stuff.
Especially a guy with head coaching experience. Like
Right.
this is not
Well,
some
and
up
also,
and coming offensive line coach who's just focused on the offensive
but like,
line.
you know, Jeff Stoutland, right? Like if Jeff Stoutland, who's never been a head coach, if he was your offensive line coach, he should be designing the run game. I mean, that's just kind of how I view it. But what I thought was most important and most unique was about talking about his dad's adaptability in teaching and the coaching style. We talked about how, you know, Brian Callahan is bringing this emotional intelligence, you know, and all this kind of stuff to it, a high level degree, and a lot more about openness and stuff. But like his dad has been the old school authoritative guy. He's lived through that era, and now he's adapted to be this new teacher and leader of men and understanding. And he said that he was the most analytics driven person in the building. So I would love for someone to get into an analytics discussion with Bill Callahan, because I think it would be great. But the fact that he said that his dad is so into EPA, expected points added. I just pulled off the exit from Memphis over to in Goodlettsville. Just pulled off the exit. And I thought I was going to have to drive myself to the hospital because I just thought I was going to pass out, because I could not believe that a 67-year-old man knows about expected points added and is the most analytics driven person. He loves all the data. He loves all this information. Because if you would have asked Mike Vrabel about EPA, he either would have asked you, like, what does the Environmental Protection Agency have to do with the football? Or he may have had a brain aneurysm. You may have just like exploded his mind.
I think
because he does not like analytics.
I think in public you're right. I think private Vrabel is a different Vrabel, but I agree with you. In public,
I disagree. I think
you
you can't say that you're analytic. You can't say that I think Vrabel's analytics driven when he's shown that he is not.
I didn't say he was analytics driven. I said I think he's a much smarter guy that's not as Neanderthalish, and like he was one way to the media.
I mean, when you got a 67-year-old man out learning you and outpacing you in today's NFL, and
I don't disagree. Here's my takeaway on the play, because he was very clear. Brian Callahan was very clear on building the offense and calling the offense, two very different things, which we all know. And here's what I took away, and I'll do this quickly so we can get to the end here. But it sounds like he goes, it's going to be me, Bo, and Nick, which is Bo Hardegree, the quarterback's coach, and Nick Holz, the offensive coordinator. The three of them are going to, with Will Levis's input, going to stack the plays, right? Here's the best plays we like on 3rd and 1. Here's the best plays we like in red zone. Here's the best plays on 2nd and long. Here's the best 1st and 10 plays we like in plus territory. Whatever. They're going to stack their plays and build the sheet. And then he's got to call the game with collaborative input. This is the passing game. I take it to mean that he and his father are going to do that process with the running game. And so it's the two of them are going to stack the plays and build the offense. It's not, the scheme is mostly his father's, but he is going to stack the plays and build the play sheet with his father for the running game. They stack the play with Will Levis. They stack the plays on offense with Bo and Nick. And then at the end of the day, he'll take input on game day, but it comes down to him making the right call and him making the adjustment and him knowing what to call. That is something that he has even acknowledged in this interview, that you just don't know until you do it. And play calling, I believe play calling to be a pretty natural thing. It's an inherent skill. You either have a great feel for when to pull that thing off, to break trend, to lean into trend, to call a play again. The best you can do, though, in my opinion, is to have as much input as possible and preparation as possible. And it sounds like that with, hey, I'm going to make sure Will Levis has some say in this. I'm going to make sure my dad is running the offensive line and the run game. I'm going to make sure that Bo and Nick have a say in our 3rd and 1 calls. Ultimately, it stops with me. The buck stops with me. I've got to be the one doing it, and I've got to learn. But I thought his explanation of all of that, it's common sense sometimes, like we say, but it was very interesting to hear him explain it all and then be humble enough to say, I've got to be the one that makes the call eventually. And I got to get out there and do it first before we can say if I can do it or not. So
it'll be interesting. I loved the idea that he's studying Matt LaFleur, Sean McVay, and Kyle Shanahan, how they run play calling throughout the whole entire game. You know, Brian Callahan needs a couple of books. I got a couple of play calling books down here. widely defend him from the.
I don't
You got
think
the
he does.
Detroit Lions from 2023, the Miami Dolphins from 2023, and San Francisco 49ers from 2023. So
we'll see. We'll see. I don't think he needs him, but I do appreciate you're very kind. You're very kind, Zach. I think what you need to expect from Will Levis is in the offense is to be pretty structured for most of the first half of the season and to allow for the ball to be distributed as much as possible to as many different players as possible in as many different situations as possible. That is what I take away from watching the Niners, from watching the Rams, from watching the Packers, is don't force the quarterback to make a decision to, like, the decisions have to be quick. The processing has to be fast, but it needs to be sort of an obvious decision because the system is so well set up that you can go 1-2, 1-2-3, 1-2-3, 4, and it does not matter who you land on. You make the decision and get the ball out. And that is, like, DeAndre last year wants the football, and he was the only really dependable option. So you were locked into DeAndre. You got to be the opposite of that. It's got to be the opposite. The system has to do the work at first to allow Will Levis to earn the right to be under control of the system. That's how I took the interview. So there you go. It's I think a lot of you guys in the comments have said this, like, been a fan for, here's Ed Henry. This basically wraps it up. Ed says, been a fan for way too long. Earl Campbell days. This is the most excited I've been in a very long time. The newness of it all is very refreshing. Ed, couldn't have said it better myself. So there you go. Zach, football and other F words, stacking the inbox, bluegrass beverages, right? All that good stuff. Anything else?
All that good stuff. Yep.
All that good stuff.
We're good.
Sinkers Beverages, the Kingston Group. We do appreciate you guys as well. Thank you guys for listening. Thumbs up, rate, review, subscribe, all that great stuff. OTA's coming up on Tuesday. We will talk to you guys on Thursday. Have a great week, everybody.